So how do you enable your team to focus on their mission software? Let's take a look. If you haven't seen our video on how to balance cybersecurity and innovation, check that one first. Balancing speed, innovation, and security is far from easy, but it's impossible without DevSecOps. The concept is the same for application teams to be able to focus on their mission software. If they have to build a DevSecOps platform, a service mesh, and all these layers of enablement and baked-in security, they're never going to get this done. We've seen teams in DoD spend millions and up to a year to build a DevSecOps platform just so they can end up focusing on their mission software a year too late. You don't have that luxury of time. You want to create a cloud and a platform team that's going to provide an enterprise service that will be used by your mission teams to build mission software. That's how you decouple, and that's how you accelerate the implementation of DevSecOps across your organization. That's why you must have a cloud and a DevSecOps teams. Of course, you could leverage SaaS or PaaS services out there, but again, this is such a critical capability when it comes to enabling your teams that you must really control and embrace the understanding that it goes with creating a DevSecOps platform. This is how we separated in DoD this tedious and innovative work between teams by creating Platform One and Cloud One. Let's take a look. So as we talked about, we separated the different layers. We separate infrastructure, the platform layer. So the infrastructure is provided by Cloud One. So you have an abstracted cloud layer with the same identity management and the same ability to get access to cloud services by the DevSecOps and mission teams. So that's the first enabler, getting streamlined access to the cloud. Second enabler is creating the platform layer and having both the Kubernetes stack managed, the continuous integration, continuous delivery pipeline, and then finally your service mesh team to be able to bring zero trust to your enterprise so that the application teams can simply piggyback on this to build their mission software. So DoD is a massive organization. We have so many teams building software. We had dozens of teams building DevSecOps platforms, spending millions of taxpayer money, often 10, 20 million a year, on creating their own DevSecOps platform. By creating Platform One, we're able to aggregate and consolidate both the funding, but more importantly, the talent. It's so difficult to find talent that's capable of doing this kind of work. By merging the teams and picking the best of breed stack, which we kind of compared throughout a year to pick the best foundation, and then we augmented it by merging the teams and consolidating the work. That became Platform One. So when you create a platform team, you want to make sure you're thinking as a company within the company, meaning your customers of that platform team are your mission software custom development teams, and they must be happy and excited to use the service. It can be mandated, but at the end of the day, if you're not delivering a good service, you're failing at building an enterprise service. And it has to bring the right capabilities, move at the pace of relevance, so that teams don't try to find excuses not to use it or create their own stack in vacuums. If there is a gap, let's say the team needs something missing from the platform team and it's 5% of the equation, it kind of makes sense to say, hey, let's put your funding into the platform team so we can build the 5% and accelerate the journey of the enterprise team. So now we can build a better, stronger enterprise service as a centralized team by aggregating the funding and doing more and being more efficient by spending money wisely. Now, we created 2 free services to start getting excitement and also streamlining the adoption of DevSecOps. We created RaPor One and Iron Bank. RaPor One is all the source code of instantiating DevSecOps so teams can see exactly how to do it. And more importantly, create a community around it, both with industry and with labs and partners of DoD and nations partners as well. And then we also created Iron Bank, where we centrally harden and accredit 1,000+ tools, both open source and commercial tools. I think people should definitely reuse Iron Bank since it's open source. So if you're an organization on the commercial side, think about telling your teams to start by reusing Iron Bank, and then if there's containers missing, maybe you can fix the delta and bring the difference and potentially contribute back to the Iron Bank team, or just create your own repository for what's missing from Iron Bank. Those are two free services that teams can consume. Funded by the enterprise. Is going to save a lot of money not to have to assess, harden, patch, and scan all these different tools per team, and doing it centrally makes so much more sense, so that if there is a 0-day, you can now immediately patch it rapidly, not have to wait for every team to do it in a vacuum. Now, we also wanted to make sure that as an enterprise service, we can grow without becoming too bloated. So we didn't want to have a tremendous amount of centralized funding. We wanted to have a consumption funding, right? So we have Repo One and Iron Bank funded by the enterprise. That's a fixed price. That's a cost that we pay regardless of the number of customers using Platform One. But then we also wanted to make sure that we have consumption funding. So the more teams that consume Platform One, the more we grow, and there's kind of a cost per use depending of the different use cases. And so we created two services, right? The Big Bang, which gives you the ability to instantiate a replica of Platform One inside of your enclave, usually used by big programs or medium-sized programs or partners outside of DoD. So they have a full replica of Platform One, and they can contribute back maybe through developer time back into the open source community, or maybe by paying a yearly fee. So we support and maintain the Big Bang stack. The other piece was the managed service. So we created Partybus, which is a SaaS instantiation of Big Bang, where we manage it, we host it, we provide as a service. Comes with the collaboration tools, the chat, all the project management tools, cyber tools, and Git repos, and so on. And all that is already instantiated. It's a little bit more opinionated. You have less options because it's not customized to you as a customer. It's a service provided to hundreds of customers. So it's obviously a little bit less options, but it's cheaper and already up and running, and it's an easy way for smaller teams or medium-sized teams to get started compared to deploying their own instance of Big Bang by themselves, which often is a pretty hefty lift, both in terms of the technical piece and the financial piece as well. So those were kind of the services that we created as an enterprise. And then, of course, we added the cloud native access point and different things that we talked about in different videos to enable kind of that baked-in security and all the streamlining of the compliance and baked-in security capabilities in runtime and in development as well. So now, don't forget to ensure that teams make their containers and services accessible to other teams as well, so they don't have to reinvent the wheel. Ideally, we had jets use sensors, and so they would create a container to consume the data from the sensor. A ship using the same sensor could potentially reuse the same container as a Lego block. So you want to make sure you have a place where teams can not just share APIs, but in this case, the actual container and code, so they can actually reuse the container and for a different use case, but maybe a very similar use case, so that they can actually be more efficient. It's the same concept that we've seen in the SpaceX versus F-35 use case, where SpaceX reuses the Lego blocks at 80% across the different platforms, versus F-35 only reusing 4% of code with F-22s. That's probably not a good idea, right? You want to be able to be modular and reuse these Lego blocks across teams. For that, you need to give an artifact repository and a source code repository where teams can publish all these Lego blocks for consumption with the right documentation as well. Now, what's also very important to understand is that the concept of microservices allow teams to use the best tool to get the job done, which means they can pretty much pick up any tool, any database, and implement it so that they can deliver their mission software. Of course, cyber must be kept in mind and containers must be hardened, but more importantly, some layers have to be opinionated, right? You can't just let everybody do everything they want. it will be chaos. There are a few key components that should not be customized per team and should really be provided as an enterprise opinionated service, particularly when it comes to some of the critical cyber pieces. The first piece is identity management, ICAM, where your ICAM stack needs to be managed by the enterprise, and the identities, both of your people and of your non-person entity, your microservices and containers and things talking to each other, have a strong identity, and you know exactly where they're coming from, and that the process is controlled, and the access control and least privilege is enforced across all these use cases. The other example of that is your policy enforcement point, PEP stack, from your zero trust stack, where that stack needs to be opinionated, because you cannot federate zero trust, because that would equate to just blindly trusting someone else policy enforcement point. And so you cannot federate zero trust. So you have to mandate the right implementation of zero trust, and that has to be across your enterprise. And you need to bring that as a turnkey solution, which is what we've done at Platform One with the Cloud Native Access Point. Now, the key piece is that your DevSecOps platform team must really think as a company within your company. They're providing a service to your software teams. They need to understand that they are the customers. And even if the stack is mandated by the enterprise, they need to please the customers. And teams must be excited about using the service. And that is so essential because often we see enterprise services getting stale, getting behind, not listening to the complaints of the customers, becoming part of the problem, becoming the bottleneck, having no ability to delegate down to the data owner, for example, when it comes to assigning rights to the data. So what we did, for example, with the data fabric in DoD as an enterprise service, we made sure that the data team is not responsible for assigning rights, that instead the data owner is delegated the right to do it, so they can control who accesses the data and how the data is labeled down to the cell level, so they can control that entire process without having to talk to people at the enterprise service to get this done, meaning that we're going to avoid a massive bottleneck when it comes to assigning access control rights to users and to data. There you have it. The key to enabling your teams to focus on their mission software is to create a DevSecOps platform team that will bring them a software factory that meets their needs with the flexibility needed. That team must behave like a company, with your customers being your development teams. Layers like API discovery, routing, zero trust enforcement should be mandated by the platform team, but delegated down as practical when it comes to whitelisting decisions, for example. The more mature your DevSecOps teams will become, the more they will streamline their work and remove impediments and bottlenecks and extra work to your mission software teams, doing the work once instead of dozens of times.